Guys, it's Tripl-L, and now let's talk about Little Witch Academia. Because this week was actually pretty fun. You know, there's a lot of things that I could talk about the episode in terms of its structure, so I will. Let me just think really quickly if I need to preface anything. I'm just going to start off by saying it reminded me of Looney Tunes in both the narrative structure, what happens at the end, and just how should I handle the continuity. It reminds me of all those things from Looney Tunes, but this is actually really good. I'm not gonna lie, the car chase scene was phenomenal. You know, they really dropped down the details, but the whole fluidity of Akko driving away in a car or getting away in the car was just really cool to watch. I don't know, it's a very simple scene, and when you look at the backgrounds and you look at the backgrounds and just the foreground and what's going on, it's very simple. And that was a thing with the episode too. It was a very simple episode from a technical point of view when it comes to some of the art, but I think I understand what's going on, and ultimately the end product is something that I think is very interesting. So there's two things I really want to talk about in this video when we're talking about Little Witch Academia episode 8. First, I'm going to talk about the technical aspects of the episode, talk about that to a degree, because again, it's an episode that reminds me of the kind of animation that Looney Tunes pulled off. And then I want to talk about the ending and just actually speculate, because this episode I think puts me in a very interesting position, because this episode kind of, going with the structure, it kind of seems like an episode of a gag manga, It seems like one of those things where you just don't bother with it in continuity, at least if you were coming at it from the perspective of watching cartoons over here in the West. Anyway, let's talk about the technicality of the episode. When you look at the episode and you look at what's going on and how many things are moving in a single scene, the biggest, I don't want to say offender, because the Triggers chose a style and they stuck with it. But in terms of technicality, when you're looking at one of the scenes, specifically when Akko's talking to the mini Sucys, the innocent Sucy or conscious Sucy and the devil Sucy, I can't remember that one's name, but when you're looking at that scene, you could notice very quickly that they have reduced a lot of what they're doing, because you just have Akko's face switching between the two Sucys. There's not much else going on in the scene. When you consider how much hours they could potentially have saved by not having to draw more, by keeping it so closed up, you start to get the general gist of this episode. And then when you go back to the car chase scene, they also minimalized on how much things were going on in that scene, which ultimately I think makes it a very novel scene for this week of anime shows going on. I think it's a very novel scene, and I think it's different enough that's like, yeah, that was neat. That was really neat. And it wasn't different to the point of being obnoxious like the recent Naruto Shippuden episode. It was still consistent with the artwork that Little Witch Academia has set forward. And let's just also take a second to appreciate, and I should have started the episode off with this, but this wasn't a Sucy character development episode or a character exploration episode, because that's really what Akko was doing. And it just it was really meta in some areas, and it was just really fun to watch in like the movie theater sequence. Overall, it's a very fun episode. But yeah, again, going with the structure, before I distracted myself with praising the meta aspects of the episode, Little Witch Academia has a general aesthetic, so even in this episode, it doesn't deviate too much from it. If anything, you could argue it kind of just accentuates the already existing aesthetic to the point that it's just fully interesting to watch in some sequences. So overall, I really like the direction choice that they chose for here. And now let's actually talk about the meta aspects of the episode, because that's also part of the technicality. So one of the first things I really enjoyed was when they were calling out the different Sucys, and we saw Sucy that's easily influenced, and then you see that she is actually like a lightsaber master from Star Wars. That was really cool. I really like that reference. They were really having fun with this episode. And then the movie theater sequence might be one of my favorite scenes in Little Witch Academia, because it's simple and it's just calling back to old style cartoons. Like with this episode, when you have that sequence happening, you can really, like, at that point make an argument that they use this episode as a playground for different animation styles that exist, different animation styles that have popped up before. Because when you're seeing the movie theater sequence, there's also the serious point where you have like almost legitimate anime drawing, and then you have like what's it called, rubber hose style anime drawings with like stupid Akko, and it's just really entertaining and fun to watch. I really enjoyed that whole sequence, and I think that sequence is very important for the next part of the episode I'm going to talk about, and that is discussing what actually happened in the episode and trying to discuss whether or not this could be something we take seriously. But regardless, before we get to that, overall, the episode, I think they cut corners where they needed to because they were going for something, and then they really used the styles that they had at their disposal to the best degree possible. So that's the technicality of the episode. Now let's talk about the plot, because this is pretty interesting. I really want to hear your guys' opinions. How seriously are you going to take this episode? How are you going to make sense of what happened in this episode? Because let's first applaud it. It was a Sucy character development episode, or again, character exploration episode, and it was seen through the eyes of Akko. And again, the theater scene might be the best scene for this because it does accentuate that Sucy cares about the memory of meeting Akko the first time, and there is significance in that particular scene being drawn more seriously for a split moment. And that part of the scene was beautiful. But now, we learned a lot about Sucy, and it also delivered an interesting message on keeping your impulses under control. I'm not gonna lie, when we were at the guillotine scene and there was like actually things falling off the guillotine before we saw that they were radishes or something, I was scared. I was like, whoa, that's intense. But that's what's happening there every day. And it's just a very interesting notion. You manifest these various impulses as little forms of yourself, and then you're effectively killing them off. So you could think of it like when you're walking down the street and you suddenly have the idea to pickpocket someone. That little manifestation of you would be killed off by your conscience and everything else. And it's just very interesting and very macabre how they actually went and illustrated that with Sucy. And it works really well with Sucy because she in particular is a very sadistic person, or a very morally questionable person, right? And we see that also with her conscience, what she was ultimately going for, is that she was going for a quiet death over an excruciating, painful death, but it's still death in the same way. Regardless, I like that overall theme that humans have to kill off those little impulses. It's a very interesting theme, right? It's you could then take that idea and try and compare and contrast it to various schools of thought in the world and see which schools would fall under that kind of thought process, and whether or not the idea of killing them off is appropriate for whichever school you're defending in that point of the argument. Anyway, it had a good theme on what it means to keep yourself under control. But now, let's talk about what happened here, because at the end of the episode, it wants to make you think it was all a dream, although we still have the hint from Sucy that she remembers the contract. Because in this episode, Akko goes into the mind of Sucy to wake her up because her powers are leaking out and we just don't know what's happening. At the end, we also have a mushroom sprouting I think during the black screen. Now, that is a very American cartoon way of doing things, right? Like, you have these one-off standalone episodes, and then you have this one little hint at the end that makes you wonder, whoa, did that actually really happen? But now, because this is an episode of a serialized format, it's like, do I take this seriously? And I really like what Trigger did here, because if you look back to the movie theater scene, you're first off told that you're first off told that the theater is playing memories, and it's really Osmosis Joan in that way, like how things inside of you go to watch your memories at the movies. But anyway, you're told that those are memories, and then there's one specific memory, and that was Sucy pouring the drink into Akko. But as viewers, we didn't actually see that happen. Sucy opted against it and she drank it herself. But that scene is still happening on the context that the memories are real. So how do we deal with this, right? Because if you look at the last statement that Akko owes her so-and-so, as according to the contract that was established at the beginning of the episode, it would want to make you think, okay, all of that really actually happened. But then in that memory theater sequence, you have the sequence where you have Akko also having the drink. So it really depends. it depends on if you take that final statement in the episode to legitimize everything, because you could argue that that contract was made at a different time point that we as a viewer didn't see it, but the deal was made earlier. But then again, when you have like the mushroom popping up to reference the rest of the episode, it gets really difficult. And then you have to take into account Mushrogeddon and what that actually meant for the movie theater sequence. But again, it's magic. Magic is getting involved here, so it's really questionable. So here's how I want to interpret it, and I would really like to know how you guys interpret it. So here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking Sucy did drink the potion, and then after she drank it, she decided to give the rest of the potion to Akko. So that's why she could still have the memory of it in her mind for all her Sucys to watch. Secondly, they both fell into the sleep coma and they must have had a shared dream. That's the biggest leap that I'm taking in that idea, because Akko was asleep. The more extreme idea is that Mushrogeddon actually happened. And you know, that whole sequence with Lot being consumed by the mushrooms actually happened. And then something happens when Akko and Sucy are doing their thing and they manage to reverse time back to a point before Mushrogeddon happened. But there's no real hints of that in the episode, so you're making these giant leaps to kind of justify why everything could still happen and still be consistent with the episode's logic. And then the reason I'm really like going after this is because if the sequence where Sucy is pouring stuff down Akko's throat is actually real, you get the possibility of a potential being unlocked in Akko. I think that's the words that they use. It would bring out Akko's latent potential as a witch. So that's why I really want all these events to actually have happened. But it's going to be interesting to see. We need to see like the next episode. Regardless, this is a bit of a mind mess because it's drawing on that line. Do we take this seriously or not? Now, if it was all a dream, then it would do a disservice to Sucy, because what happens to her character? It's kind of delegitimized, right? Because all this happened in Akko's mind. But if it was a shared dream, then I think that's more legitimate. If it was something where they actually went into a parallel reality and then because of their latent power they were able to come back to another parallel reality where before everything went wrong, then that'd also be a nice little turnaround. But we might never have an answer to that. But it's ultimately very cool. So guys, let me know what you think down below. What do you think of this episode? Do you take it seriously or not? And then finally, let's talk about the dragon sequence when it was climbing up the tower. I found it really funny how they reused the animation for the dragon going up and down. And then, of course, Akko trying to kiss Sucy was a funny little thing. I loved it that the dragon was just like also watching. 'Cause I feel that was me too. Like, oh my god, whoa, are they gonna do it? Oh man, that would be cool. And then the dragon's like, yeah, whoa, this will be excellent. And ultimately how Akko fails on 2 counts is really funny. But anyway, guys, I think I'm going to end it there. This episode was really fun to watch. And I like this kind of thing. I like this kind of mind screw. So, guys, let me know what you thought of the episode down below. And till next time, I hope you have a really great day.